computer. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inspire Me Forward, and welcome to episode 15. This is our last episode of June, and that is our last episode of our 6-month anniversary. We are so happy that you have been with us and are with us to just listen to these amazing folks from around the world and their inspiring stories and their inspiring journeys so far. Tonight, we've got the wonderful George Brauneis from Colorado. And George has decided to entitle this one From Rocket Science to Horsing Around. So, George, I'm just going to let you give a quick introduction to yourself.
All right. I hope that's working. Yeah, my name's George Brauneis, and I am an active, boots on the ground advocate for wild horses, specifically the American Mustang and the American Wild Burro. I'm 57 years old, so I'm not old yet, but I'm definitely not young either. I have made quite a circular path in my life, and it's interesting how what my passions were when I was 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old have come back around to what I'm doing now at 57 years old, with a lot of paths that I've taken because other people said I should do that, because I've got a good head on my shoulders, because you got to live the American dream, you got to make a lot of money, you got to have a high paying job, and you got to go to college, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. And all of the conditioning that our society places on the youth and young adults to become adults and be a contributing, tax-paying member of society. So that's a little bit. I mean, I started with horses and computers in the early 70s. And actually, I started with horses in the late 60s, computers in the 70s. And both those paths have been parallel in a lot of ways throughout my life, with the emphasis being on the computers and the engineering in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, and then returning back to horses after that.
Yeah, awesome. Where are you located in Colorado, George?
It's a very small town called Eckert, Colorado, and I can prove on a map that I live a half mile from the middle of nowhere.
Oh, there's a town called Nowhere?
Street up is called Nowhere.
Not too many people can say that.
Yeah, I live a half mile from the middle of nowhere.
Excellent, excellent. And so you're not far from, so is it Grand Mesa that had all the snow this winter?
Grand Mesa, yeah. 400, I think it was 400% of normal. They had 687 inches of snow, and there's still snow up there.
Wow.
We're doing the happy dance as far as irrigation water goes. It was a drought buster, and hay prices have dropped, which is hallelujah when you're feeding 27 Mustangs and 7 burros. When prices go from $12 a bale to $8 a bale, it's nice. A big relief to the.
Amen. Wow. So I just wanted to, before I give you the full floor here, in talking to you before and just reading what you've gone through and what you've gone through, I'd love at some point, like, the word space seems to come in a lot, and it'd be interesting to hear from you, like, how you talk about aerospace, but now you're offering a space for the horses, and has it come full circle in that vastness of space? I'd love just to touch, to weave that in somewhere, because the word space, as I was writing things, I was like, oh, there's the word space keeps coming in here, but what does that mean to you? So you and I also talked before a bit, and it's come up so many times, is this, and you touched briefly on it there, is this idea of what we're supposed to do. And as we're growing up, and I'm finding a through line for all of my guests so far have been an anchor. Like, what's an anchor in childhood? For me, it was, I don't know what grade, young grade it was, but it was going to another school and dancing. And I don't know why we did it. I remember my mom watched me, we were dancing with scarves, and there was a freedom in that feeling. And I always go back to that. I've heard other people talk about daydreaming. One guest talked about daydreaming, but then they were told, stop daydreaming. But as they moved through life, they found that anchor kept coming back. So, I'd love to sort of touch on that. And then what are those things that sort of push those anchors back and push those anchors away and then drew them back to you? Or fully drew them back to you. So I will give you the floor, but I'd love to sort of, see if we can weave those things in too. If not, we'll chat about them afterwards. So over to you.
Awesome. Yeah, space and the vastness of space is, yeah, it's going to circle around. My father was a professional geophotographer. So before there was satellite photography, before there was, Google Earth or Google Maps or all that, back in the 50s, my dad would do photography from a helicopter for doing maps and all kinds of aerial photography. And that was his professional job. And as a hobby, he was an astronomer. But I mean, he had a telescope that would rival what you had at universities. And so yeah, space was definitely a part of my life from the get-go. We would go out in the middle of the night and, we were chasing, I remember Comet West back in 1976 and viewing that and just how amazing and massive that comet was and just the whole universe and everything. And we're talking about anchors and one thing that I think it was probably Carl Sagan that said it first, but my dad hammered it home, is that the human body is literally at the center of the universe. You can go inward just as deep as you can go outward to the edge of the universe. And so that alone is like, holy cow, does that put things in perspective? From the edge of the universe to the smallest subatomic particle, and we're right smack dab in the middle. So it's mind-boggling, and it's fun to look both ways and be open to the vastness, not just outward, but inward.
Yeah.
So we're equally vast inward as we are outward. So that was kind of my upbringing, or my dad. My mom was a school social worker, so she had the whole emotional, social, EQ, your emotional quotient, and all of that. So I had all the scientific, photographic, and my photography. I picked that up from my dad too. So it was like I had these. My parents were like, they truly were the yin and the yang. They complemented each other, yet they were so dramatically different. But the two of them complemented each other, and then that goes into the whole circle and I always believe in oneness over everything. That we are really one, and we got to stop focusing on all of the things that make us different are minuscule in comparison to what makes us the same. And so we've just that's just another, I guess that's kind of Taoism in a nutshell as well, that the sooner we realize we're one and can contribute as one, a lot of issues kind of just go by the wayside. And I've really found that in working with horses a lot. Mm-hmm. So that my youth was surrounded with astronomy, horses. So my folks were, my dad was a big Western fan and knew not well, but had met John Wayne a few times, and he was convinced that his boys are all going to have horses. And so there was always a horse in my life from the time I was 2 years old. And when we moved to Delta, Colorado, which is just a little ways here from Eckert, but lived out on a 17-acre ranch, and the ranch came with a mammoth burro named Old Ed. And we weren't there but about 6 months, and we got a retired barrel racing horse for myself. And that was me at about 7 years old and through high school. So I had Old Ed, and he didn't like adults at all, but boy, did he love children. And he was the one, he would lower his head, and you would throw your leg over his neck and hold on to his ears, and he'd lift his head up and he'd slide down his neck and he'd be on his back. So, I mean, it's just, he was a marvelous, marvelous mammoth donkey. And just, he was just kind of, I don't know, a combination between Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh and one big fuzzy critter. And then Taffy was just a perfect little quarter horse that we went on adventures all over the place, just me and my dogs. So that's an anchor point of the, and then my dad was so tech savvy and stuff. He always had the Heath kits, and he was always building radios or building this contraption or whatever. And then the computer era came on in the early 70s with the TRS-80 and the Apple II, and oh boy, he had to make sure he had one of those in the house. And so it was, so in the beginning, it's just the three anchor points have been, astronomy, photography, the horses, and computers. And it just, I kind of like just would be on one path a lot more than another. Mm-hmm. And after high school was, you go to college so you can get that education, so you can get a good job. So Taffy got rehomed. Old Ed passed away at, we believe he was 48 years old. And when I was a sophomore, and we rehomed Taffy, and she got to raise another kid and took her through high school. And then they rehomed her, and she raised another kid and took them through high school. And she passed away, I believe, at the age of 34 years old. And she got to raise 3 kids. So it was, had a wonderful life doing what she loved. Yeah. And kids loved being with her. Mm-hmm. So, I got through college, and I was, again, the parallels were here. So as I really focused on computers and that in college, not so much the engineering, but it was information technology. And that was still kind of a new thing in the 80s, but it's information technology, network administration, and all the technical computer side. And after college, I took a job back where my parents were at in Parachute Battlement Mesa. And I was working for the recreation department just because it was an available job while I was, doing the job hunt for a real job. And I met the most intriguing man. It's kind of like you hear the stories of the people that met Howard Hughes in passing and how it changed their life. Well, this gentleman's name was Dale Rogers, and he was an aerospace engineer and machinist that went back to the 50s. So at this time, he was probably in his mid-60s, semi-retired, but he had a large aerospace machine shop in California. And I met him at the rec center. I don't know, we just got to talking and found him very intriguing. And he was always having problems with his computers and stuff. And he'd asked me to come over and help fix his computers so he could stay in touch with his shop in California and didn't have to fly out there. And somehow I gained his trust and must have impressed him some way. And he offered me a job that was paying 6 figures out in Southern California, working at his aerospace machine shop to keep his computers running, keep his network going, and all of that technical stuff. Meanwhile, at the same time, Parachute Battlement Mesa is the home of John Lyons, the world famous natural horsemanship trainer. And so there's that cross again where I'm kind of hanging out and observing John Lyons at his events and his clinics and what have you as an auditor and an observer, because at that time didn't have a horse, but I was still just loved horses and really admired how John Lyons approached horsemanship. So I kind of had an opportunity to either stay in Parachute Mountain Mesa and possibly work with John Lyons, or go to California and help run all the technical stuff at Dowell's aerospace shop. So I chose California. I'm like, holy cow, it's California, it's Southern California. I'm in my mid-20s. I mean, just everything sounded super appealing, mid to late 20s. So I went to California, and it was probably the most phenomenal 10 years as it comes to productivity and ingenuity and working with absolutely brilliant people and building everything from parts that are on the space station to different military aircraft, commercial aircraft, and always look up in the sky and go, boy, I wonder if I have a part on that plane or not. And just working with the designers and the process of how you build aerospace and rocket parts from just billets of aluminum and titanium is just fascinating. And meeting, middle management and some higher up folks at Boeing and McDonnell Douglas at the time and Northrop and just, kind of hobnobbing with some really, really, really smart people.
Yeah. Excellent.
And then September 11th happened, 2001, and the world stopped. Yeah. And my house was about 10 miles from John Wayne International Airport. And if anybody's flown out of John Wayne International Airport, you take off and you literally go straight up. It's really quite an ascent, because they want the airplanes to not make a lot of noise over the city unless you're directly beneath the flight path, which my house was. So, I mean, the house would rumble when the planes were flying overhead. And for 3 days, when there wasn't any aircraft in the silence was deafening. Yeah. And being so close to Los Angeles, I was just sitting there going, I don't know if I want to be this close to a potential ground zero, after the hits of, in Washington and New York. And I was like, wow, the targets on the West Coast would be Seattle and Los Angeles. And I remember the port of Los Angeles shutting down and the container ships stacked up from Huntington Harbor all the way to the port of Los Angeles. And you could literally jump from one container ship to another from Huntington Beach all the way to Los Angeles. There were so many ships stacked up, and it was just 3 days of just watching the earth come, or the earth, but the country come to a standstill, and you're smack dab in one of the busiest places in the nation.
Yeah.
And it just was, it took me 2 more years to get back home to Colorado, but it was that moment that was like, you got to get back to your roots. You got to get back to, rural America, and enough chasing the money and enough of being caught up in the system. And let's work back towards getting to a simpler, more fulfilling life.
Can I jump in here? What did you take with you from that time in aerospace and that you were working there? What did you take with you from that you use now? It's still in you now.
Yeah, it would be, I guess holistic would be a holistic way of looking at things, where, when you're on the CAD machines, helping build the parts, you're talking a 360-degree, 3-dimensional representation. And you're looking at it virtually on the CAD machine, and then you go downstairs and you're looking at the 5-axis machine while the part's being built. And it's just this way of looking at things from a complete circular 360-degree perspective, instead of just looking at it from one point, your point.
Yeah.
That taking it all in. And there are times in problem solving that the programs that we got from Boeing, there may have been a glitch or something. And so there's the engineer and a couple other people are always getting together going, okay, we've got, because there's always revisions. There's always parts, and then you got to record all that. But and just that problem solving, where it's more like, you know, something's not right, but you're not set and saying that you're right. You're realizing that something's not right, and we've got to come up with a solution. So the part's going to fit. It's going to work.
Yeah.
It's going to, you know, it's not going to break. Last thing you want is a broken part on an airplane, or a submarine, or a rocket ship, or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was a way of problem solving without the goal was to be right with the finished product, not for any one individual to be right.
Yeah. That's
If
important.
that the rightness is in the end result, not that any one person was right, because it took multiple people to come up with the solution. Not having that ego where it's like, I'm right and I've got the solution, and, you know, my way or the highway type thinking. It was that working either as a team or even as an individual, as problem solving from, you know, a prism that's got multiple facets.
Yeah. So important. Like that's what so often it's who's right.
Right. Yeah. You
Not
get into
what's
politics
right.
and you got left is right, the right's right, the middle, you know, it's kind of like, well, y'all got part of the answer, and, you know, you've got to move together, not move apart.
Yeah. And that duality does push people apart, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Wow. So where did you go next? You came back to
Colorado. I landed a really good position at a company called Chaco Sandals in Paonia, Colorado. Again, in Delta County, about 40 miles from where I'm at now. And I was their network administrator and took care of all the computers, and did a lot of the same stuff in aerospace, but now we're building sandals and shoes. And the factory was right there in Paonia. So again, it was very familiar with. We were taking models, and they were using a simpler. They were using AutoCAD, not CATIA, for their CAD system, but they were designing sandals and then building the sandals and manufacturing them right there in Paonia, Colorado. So it was similar, but I shifted from, you know, airplane parts to sandals that people wear. But it was very similar work. I mean, so it was technical, but it took a step towards outdoorsy, being that sandals, I mean, it was probably one of the most popular sandals for river rafters and hikers and all of that. So that was my next shift. And it brought me back to Colorado and allowed me, I wasn't in a position, I didn't have land for a horse, but I was close to a couple of horse rescues that I was able to help with and volunteer with, and started getting more horse time.
Yeah.
And following my passion. And then that gradually, unfortunately, that company went out of business in 2009. And I wasn't going to move. I was happy where I was at. My parents were getting older, and I kind of shifted from working full time to working part time and taking care of my parents full time. I just honored their wishes that neither of them wanted to go to a nursing home, and with with enough help, myself and a retired RN, we were able to keep them in their homes until my mom passed when she was 90 and my dad when he was 92, and kept them both out of the nursing home.
Mm.
So
How, if I could just step back for a moment. So you coming from California back to Colorado, what were some of the, like, I know you talked about 9/11, that was sort of that push to go, no, I'm going to change this. So but what were some of the things you had to sort of reconcile with? Like maybe there was a change in pay, maybe there was a change in lifestyle. Like what were some of the things you had to sort of go, well, that was that, but this is this?
yeah, there was, I mean, my pay was coming back to Colorado was about half of what I was making in California,
Mhm.
but the cost of living wasn't as high. But yeah, it was a big pay cut. Stress levels came down, so that was a plus. In aerospace, it was, 60-hour work week was normal, and sometimes it was 80 plus hours a week.
Mhm.
And so you had all this money, but you didn't have time. And it was the old golf joke. It's like, when I have the time, I don't have the money, and when I have the money, I don't have the time. So I have the money and I don't have the time, and in California, and then come back to Colorado, and it was definitely more, well, I've got a little more time, but I got a lot less money. So it's always seems to be, you've got a lot of one and not enough of another. And then there was a big shift in shifting over to elder care. And again, I realized that, money's, we need money to survive. We all have bills to pay. We all have, you know,
Sure.
whatever. We need a certain amount of money every month just to, keep our heads above water.
Yeah.
But elder care, there was just that time is so much more valuable than money. And it's how you, and caring for my folks, I took another um cut and pay. I went and worked for a local grocery store because I had an opportunity to be a night manager. So it left my days pretty free. So I was free with my parents during the day, and then
Mhm.
their neighbor, who was a semi-retired and then became retired, registered nurse. While she was working, I was with my folks, and then when she got off of work, she was right next door. So if they needed her for anything, they could get a hold of her. And then
Mhm.
that allowed me to night manage the grocery store and pull in a decent income, but allowed me the time during the day to
Mhm.
be with my folks.
Mhm.
And at that time, I did have a couple of horses at a friend's place, and they're conveniently between work and where my parents lived. So I'd spend time either on the way to work or the way from. Anyhow, I got more horse time in,
Nice.
and but it just was another shift that time is so much more valuable than money.
Yeah.
And after my parents passed, then I bought my ranch here, and it was from some savings from California, and a large chunk of it was inheritance from my family, from my parents. And again, it was a belief that, well, my folks worked hard 40 plus years for their house and their money, and I wasn't gonna, you know, the nursing homes will take that money so fast, and you'll look, tune is 8,000 plus a month.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just, so their legacy lived on now in this ranch.
Nice.
So, and then one day I was just sitting there in front of the computer and I'm crunching numbers and stuff. And it came to the point, I'm like, wait a minute, if I structure this right, I can be just as well off at home working with horses, training some horses, fostering horses, offering a class or two,
Yeah.
offering a few clinics through the year. And and the timing again was crazy. I resigned from the grocery store set on Labor Day of 2019. So we're talking like maybe 3 months before COVID hit.
Yeah.
And COVID hit, a few months before we even knew what the heck it was.
Yeah.
I got out of that mass exposure in September of 2019, and I came home. So I had a fair number of horses here, and I was getting set up, Zoom and Facebook and different things over the internet for connecting and networking for wild horses. And it was another one of those. It was just looking back now, it just is like, wow, am I that lucky, or was that a nudge from from whoever your creator may be? But I was like, wow. And I've worked harder as my own boss than I ever did for anyone else.
But not as stressed.
But not as,
maybe a different stress.
yeah, it sometimes is a different stress. But I think weathering the pandemic and now this post-pandemic era that we're in, it's less stressful here than I could ever imagine in a big city, and or holding down a 40-hour job that is dealing with the public all the time and exposed to all that. So the stresses are different, but it is less stressful.
Yeah.
And it's just been, just weathering the pandemic and post-pandemic has been quite an interesting ride for 3 years.
I bet, yeah. So I want to go back to something what you said at the beginning about, well, we talked about space, and you talked about inward. You go inward just as deep as you can go outward. But my heart is telling me, let's jump into like the horses and how they've, like, over that maybe that time that you've come back to there since, that 3 months before COVID, and you decided to come back fully. How is that, how's that been through for yourself and that sort of inward journey, maybe?
Yeah, it's been the inward journey, and the horses are so magnificent when it comes to, most people are thinking, well, do you ride your horse, or are you doing, they're thinking, where do you go with your horse? And it's like, again, you have the options. You can go out with your horse, or you can go inward with your horse or horses. And the inwardness, when you are with a herd of once wild horses, is really, it has to be experienced. I'm not even sure that there's truly words for it, but it's like, if you've ever been in a Michael Jackson used it, that is the floating chamber that you would float on salt water, and then they closed the lid, and it was pure dark, and then there was no sound, and it was just that stillness that is, there's a stillness within a herd of wild horses that I've never experienced in a group of people. Unless it's being shared with the horses.
Unless you're with the horses to do it, yeah.
It's just, people talk about the sound baths and all of those type things, and the very yoga and tai chi and qigong and all of those. But man, when you experience stillness with a herd of horses, and I love going out at midnight and just be with a herd, because all the background, unless there's a siren going off for an emergency or whatever, it is so still, and they're the dark, and yet it can be so light, even though it's so dark. that just from the starlight, and just, you don't even really see where the horses are. You feel where they are,
Feel them. Yeah.
and they feel where you are, and they know exactly where you are, and it's just, it is a level of calm that I don't think anybody in New York City, unless they really worked at it, would ever experience, or the
Yeah.
hustle and bustle of any city.
When you said level of calm there, I almost thought you were going to say level of consciousness.
And that comes next. I wouldn't call, I want to call it an out of body experience, because it's not. You're still in your body, but you really, it is a level of consciousness that's shared with the horses. It's kind of like, oh wait, well, is that me or is that the horse? And it is an inner space that, you get into that oneness again. And I think that's what a lot of horsemen and horsewomen aspire for, is that oneness with their horse, that the horse moves when you move when the horse, and it's just that you don't really know where the human ends and the horse begins.
Yeah.
And you see that in, not just great riders, but people that do incredible groundwork with horses at Liberty.
Mm.
And it's just, and they're attuned to that. They can feel you faster than they can hear you or see you.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
And and our feelings, and it's feelings, not so much emotional, but it's an awareness, and it's the experiential feelings, not the I'm crying, I'm angry, I'm happy feelings, but the wow feelings. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's just some things I can share with the horses, people wouldn't believe unless they saw it.
Yeah.
I've got a very wild young 2-year-old black gelding that was pulled off of one of our local horse ranges, and he's just really not wanting to come into domestication. And but he gets turned out with a herd during the day, and I bring him in at night. I just, I keep an eye on him during the day, but I want him in at night, and so he doesn't go off and get into trouble or whatever. And 2 days ago, he's got 2 mares that he's paired up with that are also in training, so they come in at night. And every day he's just come in with them because that's the routine. Well, 2 days ago, he has a girlfriend now, and it's a different mare.
Oh.
And it was like, no, I don't want to go in. I don't want to come in. I want to stay out with Junebug because she's my girl, and I want to stay out with her. And I'm like, and I'm thinking, feeling, and saying, it's like, okay, dude, June can come in with you tonight. And I see from June, and the feelings, I translate feelings, the feel, into words. I don't get, they're not speaking English, but I'm translating the feel and what they're sharing with me into words. And June looks at me and like, no, I want him to stay out with me. And so now it's literally, I've got 2 pestilent 2-year-olds out there that are like, no, don't want to come in for dinner. Don't want to come in tonight. We want to stay out. And I kid you not, I look at them both, and the rest, and this is right around feeding time. And there's probably 8 or 10 other horses there. They're like, okay, why are we goofing around? It's dinner time. And I literally felt, and I was intention of him going into the middle pen where he needs to be. And I just said out loud, nobody eats until Strider is in the middle pen. 20 seconds later, Shadow and Khaleesi come side by side on Strider and escort him into the middle pen. And Shadow leaves, and Khaleesi stands to block the entrance to the gate until I can close it. And he is. And I'm like, okay, great. Now we can all eat. I mean, how do you, that's not training. That's not something
No,
you can prove scientifically, but I can give you the evidence time and time and time again of horses being that aware and that sentient and cognizant and just stepping up.
yeah, when you say that, clarity is the word that comes to mind. And I think clarity is often doesn't have to be a word. But that clarity of, well, this is going to happen and this isn't going to happen, so you figure it out. But it's that clarity, and I think with humans, we just often don't have that clarity of intention, maybe.
Yeah.
And they understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just, I don't know, it's just amazing when you really immerse yourself in a herd where you're not demanding respect, but you're earning it and you're sharing it.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing I've really, I learned it in kindergarten, and I think I forgot it for quite a while, is it's not about giving or taking, it's about sharing.
Mm.
And it's also, you can't demand respect. You've got to earn it.
Yeah.
But then when respect is it's also a two-way street. Respect is shared, and it's when you have that level of respect, there's time the horses will ask for help.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, they might have their back might be sore, or they might have an itch in a spot they can't reach. And when I work with horses, I don't have them in cross ties or whatever. I'm like, here's my hand. My hand is now your hand. You move your body to where you need my hand.
Yeah. Often.
My
Yeah.
God, it's like, I need your hand right here. And it might be, they're halfway down their back, or it might be halfway down their leg, or it might just be some spot. Sometimes like, oh, you're a little warm there. And, then you can bring out the hose, pull them down a little bit or what have you. But boy, when you take time to just ask, how can I help you?
Yeah.
Instead of, oh, I know everything, and we got to go through this whole long rigmarole. And I'm like, why are we working on stuff that doesn't need to be worked on? You listen to the horse, and they know. A lot of times, I mean, I've got all the charts and books on all the meridians and all the acupressure and acupuncture points on horse, and I've never bothered to memorize it. But what I do is I use it as a reference that I go back to after I've worked with a horse.
Yeah.
And go, oh, what was I touching on? Oh, that's the triple healer. Oh, that's the meridian that's working on their kidneys. That's or what have you. And then you look and you go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You can explore a little more.
So it almost, when we're speaking of that, it almost goes back to what you spoke of with the problem solving with, I came out of the aerospace work, is that you don't have to be right. The horses, it's not about being right. It's about how do we get to the right end?
Correct. Yeah.
So
yeah. And when you truly listen to the horse and allow them a voice, and they will, oh my gosh, they will just show you exactly where they need touch.
Yeah. So did you do this when that 3 months before COVID, you were on the farm there, like, what was that progression to what you're doing, all the amazing work that you're doing now? How did that progress?
It started with Tahote,
Mm-hmm.
whose barn name is Taters. I got her in 2015. So this was in the process of, caring for my parents, and had a really good friend that I was able to have Tahote at her ranch and work with Tahote she was going to be an extreme Mustang makeover horse. And I blew out my knee walking across a hayfield. and partially torn ACL, and competing was not an option, but also not getting rid of losing Tejote wasn't an option either. I was keeping her.
Mhm.
So in working with her, she was a very confident, very strong, outspoken 5-year-old wild Mustang mare.
Mhm.
And she was basically saying no to virtually every natural horsemanship technique I tried with her. It was no to this, no to that. She was, the Mustangs are handled with flags and sticks, and and they're moved as quickly as possible by BLM because they just want to get them from point A to point B. And so these horses, she especially was like, I tried the stick and the string, and she was flat out no to that. And I tried flag, and she's flat out no to that. And it got me starting to explore, okay, outside of natural horsemanship, what are my other options?
Mhm.
And I stumbled across Elsa Sinclair's movie, Taming Wild,
Mhm.
and I was like, wow. So what if you go into this pen with a wild horse as vulnerable as they are?
Mhm.
So I'm going in with no tools, just me. And I'm going to keep my thumbs in my pocket. So I don't have arms waving around like a mountain lion or a hungry bear or what have you. And if I just go in there and just be as vulnerable and as, again, clear as they are. So I am being openly honest with her instead of bringing my goal for the day is this, or my agenda is this, that I just am coming here. It's like, okay, well, how are we gonna share the space together? How are we going to coexist, or how are we going to just be together? Don't really need to do anything. And things just started clicking. And it was then she started getting more interested in me because I wasn't really asking of anything of her other than to just be there with me. And in that same time I was reading one of the books by Mark Rashid, and he's deep into Aikido, which is a martial art that's a purely defensive martial art. So it's a Japanese martial art, and so it's working with energy and movement and flow and all of that. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to do what Mark does. Turns out the closest Aikido dojo is 180 miles away. So I'm like, well, that's not going to work. And I came across Qigong online,
Mhm.
and I could take online courses through Qigong. And I was like, okay, this is even better because it is a healing natural art. It is a sharing natural art. It's not about self-defense or offense or anything like that. It's just more about your getting yourself right,
Yeah.
and helping get everything else right. So I started taking qigong lessons online, and the two just naturally went together.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, oh, wait a minute, I think these horses are probably qigong masters more than us humans. So that's kind of where it started, and I've just carried that on, and I've met some amazing people that I can share later on, or in the after the post or what have you, that have been based in qigong work or in Taoism and what have you, that is really honoring and putting nature first.
Mhm.
Instead of putting ourselves above nature or separating ourselves from nature. We
Yeah.
still are very much a part of nature.
We are, yeah. Have you had anybody, I know many people are trained in it, but have you had any people come out, like traditional masters come out?
Um,
That makes
as,
sense.
as far as like
Qigong,
Alicia,
like, yeah, somebody somebody from like from a monastery over, and like.
no, I haven't. Alicia's probably as close, and
Mhm.
she's been studying Qigong for 25, 35 years.
Yeah.
And I have been interviewed by Lee Holden,
Mhm. Yep.
who I've taken most of my Qigong classes from. And I've got an
Mhm.
interview in his magazine and online, and
Nice.
have not met him in person. I'm hoping to someday
Yeah.
when he comes to Colorado. Um, just a couple of local Qigong and Tai Chi teachers, but
Mhm.
nothing at the world level of mastery of
Mhm.
a Qigong master or what have you. But
Mhm. Mhm.
it's and again, the Qigong I'm doing is modified, because
Yeah.
I'm not really using the arm movements and stuff, because wild horses are like, what in the heck are you doing with your hand? What are you doing with your arms? So I've modified it to be as horse-like as possible.
Yeah.
So it's more the hip sway and the leg movements and that, which the horse understands.
Absolutely. It's the dance. It's when we watch your videos, it's that, to me, the word that comes from me is that dance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's beautiful,
Oh,
and it doesn't require sticks or any tools.
mhm.
It just requires, that both of us are willing and present to
Oh,
be part of the dance.
exactly. What a great lesson for humanity. Well, what, other than midnight that you spoke about, what's your favorite part of your day?
Oh goodness, I would probably the morning. I mean, I'm up at 5, and I'm out, not so much in the winter, then
Mhm.
but most of the year, early morning, feeding that sun at daybreak, so maybe 15 minutes before sunrise, and
Mm.
feeding. And it's just, I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about Colorado. It might be, okay, it's 94 degrees right now, which I think is 30, 33, 34 degrees centigrade. I
Yeah.
mean, it's hot and it's windy. I mean, it's kind of like a convection oven out there right now. But the mornings, it'll be um, maybe 38 to 41 degrees. So just a few degrees above,
Mhm.
above freezing. And you got to wear a jacket, or, at least a heavy long sleeve shirt. And you're feeding the horses and doing all the morning chores. And it's just, again, it's that stillness and that calm. And then around 7:30 in the morning or so, then you're hearing the diesel trucks start up, and the tractors are starting
Yeah.
up, and
Yeah.
there's traffic on the road, and there'll be some airplanes in the air, and the stillness is kind of gone for
Mhm.
the day. But boy, that first hour or two in the morning is just, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Golden time. So I want to give us time afterwards. What we usually ask, and there's been so much wisdom already in this, but we usually ask of our guests is if you could share with us 3 nuggets of wisdom that we could take like with us. Although it's what we spoke of, there's been so much. I've written like 4 pages already, but if you could, yeah, if you could zero that in, if you had 3 top pieces of wisdom from the horses, from yourself, from you both.
Right. I think from the horses, from qigong, from the pandemic and post-pandemic, um I'm sure somebody said it before, but I've never found it, so I'm claiming it as my own. Until somebody can share who said it first, I'll be happy to give them credit. But in my qigong work and working with the horses, and just sitting back and observing all the silliness that's going on in the world, is that the mind can be manipulated, the heart can be fooled. Always trust your gut.
Yeah.
Because I again, I can't say who said it. I know somebody quoted it, that your gut is a guardian angel speaking to you.
Nice. Yeah.
So it's just, and I think that's the biggest shift from rocket science to horsing around, is you aren't up in your head as much. You don't use you're not using you don't have to have all the technical skill. You don't have to have all the, I mean, geometry and trigonometry when you're in aerospace is like, oh, it gives me a headache. Thank God for computers. But anyhow, it's just it's that shift that you get, and even all the heart-based work, your gut is your foundation of your body. And it's just, when your gut's right, everything else kind of tends to line up. And when you overthink things, what happens? You end up with a stomach ache or ulcers, what have you.
Of course.
And you're stressing out, and then you run the risk of a heart attack. So it's like you really have got to calm that mind, because use your mind for what it's made for, to help solve problems, not create problems.
Exactly. Well, there's another good piece of wisdom. Okay, let's go on to number 2.
Yeah. When all else fails, step back and breathe. Just breathe. And there's just that giving yourself time to breathe kind of allows you that little bit of time to better digest or better comprehend what might be stressing you out. And it's like, don't forget to breathe.
Yeah, Eleni, in our Life Living in Love discussion the other day, she quoted that breathing as just number 1. Just this is my breath. You can't take my breath from me. And
and it's 5 minutes I do with all horses before I ever start anything. I ask if I have permission to enter their pen, or if I'm out in the, out with a herd, I'll ask for, is it okay to stand by you?
Yeah.
And then if I get a yes, and we'll just stand there and we'll do some very deep qigong breathing exercises that literally you start breathing into the earth. You're breathing that deep. So yeah, breath is key to so many things, because when you startle, when you panic, you're shallow breathing.
Oh, that's signaling to them, like, go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then I find the over the years with the horses, is the number of horses that when we start to come towards them and with them, with those breathing and with all that, the number of horses that when you forget to, they go, stop, you forgot something. And they insist upon it. Like, no, you're not coming in this space until you remember to do that. Yeah. Oh, yes. So, okay, number 3.
Number 3 is, don't forget to feed your dog. Gar. Oh, good. He was such a good boy.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, God. I think right there is, it's okay to laugh.
Yeah.
And please laugh. I mean, it seems these past few years, it's like people have become humor impaired. It's like, it's okay to laugh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially at yourself.
Absolutely. Laugh and play, and absolutely.
Play, and you'll get further in a play session than you ever will in a training session.
I decorated my dog's crate today, so I played.
So
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if you had a call to action, so if you had one thing that those that are here, those that are listening, And the next day, just one call to act, something for them to do, actionable step in the next day. What would that be?
Oh goodness. That is, I know my personal call to action, and I sent you the PDF on it, is Project Cirrus.
Mhm.
And that's to, I hope I don't hang out with you. Please. There, just sit. It's to ensure that we're putting a stop to all these horses that are ending up in kill pens and going into the slaughter pipeline. So it's a passion of mine, but I also don't believe in paying exorbitant prices to the people that are operating the kill pens. So basically you're paying ransom to pull the horse out of there.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I'm doing all that I can along with Grand Valley Horse Rescue and a couple of other smaller rescues on the Western Slope to ensure that we at least have stopped the pipeline here in Western Colorado, that we're getting to the horses hopefully before they even go to a sales barn. But if they get to a sales barn, that we're there outbidding the kill buyer. So we're basically saying no from my neck of the woods. We're saying no to mustangs going into the slaughter pipeline.
Yeah, stops here. Yeah,
It stops here,
sure.
but here means Western Colorado. I really don't have the capability, funds, time, what have you, to stop that in Texas or Oklahoma or wherever. That if people could just duplicate what we've done in the past year, I mean, we've said no. And as far as we know, no Mustang from Western Colorado has gone to the kill pen in Eastern Colorado.
Wow.
It's been 12 or 15 horses that we've managed to keep out of the slaughter pipeline.
Nice, nice. And they go, where do they go? Places or?
Some have come here, some have gone to Grand Valley Horse Rescue, a couple have gone to a friend of mine in Montrose. So we're finding either temporary or permanent homes for them, and we're trying to get the word out to all the local veterinarians and other places, feed and tax stores and what have you, that if you need to, instead of selling your horse at the auction, if you're going to find a new home for him or her, that, get a hold of us and we will help you find them a good home.
Absolutely.
And come out of the slaughter pipeline.
Exactly. What a much better way to do it. Absolutely. All right, that's a great call to action. I will make sure we put the link up for that and everything, all the information, so people can go have a look at that. And what a great model to emulate other places too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's a local solution to a national problem, and until the laws change, it can be duplicated in wherever people that are listening or viewing this are at.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. I think that's our time. Any final words from yourself? I will give you the floor. Or your dog.
Right. I think, yeah. Eckert being a bit. He's a good boy.
He says, I've been patient.
Yeah. No, I would just have to say kudos to you and this whole series of Inspire Me Forward. It's inspiration has been lacking the last few years. And I think, how many in the last pandemic we had was 100 years ago. So nobody had that experience of going through a pandemic like this and then post-pandemic and everything else, and global upheaval with the war in Ukraine and and just there's just so much going on of uncertainties that, but it's in those times of uncertainty that, you know, you need that inspiration to move forward.
Yeah.
That, yeah, things may be in an upheaval, things may not be, I don't know if we'll ever have another normal. I don't know what normal is anymore. But it's like life finds a way. So find a way to live.
Mhm. Exactly.
I mean, if you're afraid of dying, you're not living. So it's we're all gonna die someday. So you may as well live while you can.
Yep.
And I'm also confident that this is just one chapter in the much, much, much longer experience.
Exactly.
We just don't really know what's in the next chapter until we get there. But
100%. Yep.
it's just, you know, I don't know, we come back to earth, we go up to heaven and sit at the throne, you know, or what. But I think it's just this is just the chapter we're in, and we're sharing with other people that happen to be on this planet, and may as well live and make it as pleasant for your neighbors as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. Share our stories.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, as you said, in when we did our first panel discussion on death, dying, and grief, I think you quoted, if I get the quote absolutely right here, we live in the universe's greatest playground, so we might
Yeah.
as well live.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is absolutely perfect. Thank you, George. Thank you for taking us through your trouble through life so far. Amazing to hear, you know, all your what you've done and how it's led to the next thing and the next thing. And we love the work you do with the horses, and we love watching you dance with them. It's that in itself, without saying a word, that is so inspirational.
And it's fun.
Going forward. And yeah, yeah. Why shouldn't it be? Absolutely. So with that said, thank you all for listening. I don't have anything planned yet. I think I'm going to step back for a week, and maybe we're going to just do a little brainstorming session just to sort of see what direction, how we can evolve a little bit. So I'll announce a little more on that. I encourage you to go back. We just did a panel, our second panel discussion on life, living, and love on Tuesday, which was absolutely phenomenal. It ties right in with our first one on death, dying, and grief. I encourage you to go and have a listen to that, because it was an absolutely beautiful conversation, and it was really, it's like standing with the horses. It was beyond word. Although that's all we did was talk. It really was beyond words. The feeling of it was beyond words. So really encourage you to have a listen to that. I will have this posted very shortly. And with that, thank you all for being here, and we'll see you soon.